This video is sponsored by Wise. More on moving money with no hidden fees later in the video. Most people, when it comes to moving abroad, are very focused on picking the right country, making sure they have the right visa kind, getting their flight sorted and a place to live. But whilst all this stuff is really important, there are financial elements to a move abroad as well that if you don't overlook could end up costing you thousands. So in this video, I'm going to break down a number of financial aspects of moving abroad that are often overlooked and can catch people off guard if they're not careful when it comes to moving abroad. Let's get right into it. So the first thing that can catch people off guard are the initial costs that come with relocating and moving abroad. There are a number of one-off or upfront costs or maybe prepaid expenses that you may have to face when you settle down in your new country. Because whilst you might be inclined to think, yes, I'll jump on a plane, I'll land in the new location, I'll find a place to rent, and then I start paying rent. There's obviously, the flight of the cost that comes with it. But when it comes to finding a place to rent, remember, you're also going to have to cover things like a deposit for living there, which can be at least 2 months, possibly even more, because in many cases you might be moving without a job, or you may have no prior employment history to go off. And so the landlord might be asking for additional guarantees. You've got the agency fees that are often equivalent to a month's rent that might come into it as well. The cost of temporary accommodation, which of course is a bit higher than a standard accommodation for the period of time that you're looking for that longer term place to live. Things like furniture, appliances for your new place if you need them, and also just simple things like getting documents and getting them translated and legalized and shipped and sent to you for your visa immigration process. That in itself, depending on what country you're getting documents from, what level of legalization, translations and stuff you need, that can easily be from 500 euros to 1,000 plus euros. So that's not a negligible expense and definitely should be in your budget there for these one-time upfront expenses. And putting all that together and depending on a number of financial factors, possibly where you're moving, again, you could be looking at anywhere between 5 to 10,000 euros, possibly 10,000 plus euros of upfront costs when you're moving to a new country. So the key thing to really do is write down all of these things that could come up when you move there. Do your research and understand what standard practices are around rental deposits, guarantees, things like if you have to prepay electricity or contracts, what documents you need. Laying these costs out and planning your finances accordingly, saving up and having that money available, that will help you a lot in the long run, and it will ease some of that financial pressure that comes when you relocate abroad. The second thing that can catch people out is budgeting. Now, I'd like to think that probably most people who move abroad have done some kind of financial due diligence and have laid out what they expect their financial lives to look like for the period of time they're going to be living abroad. But in doing so, my question is, how are you approaching this? Are you being optimistic or are you planning for the worst case scenario? From my perspective, and when I've prepared for relocations in the past, what I've always done is I've laid out the absolute worst case scenario. And then from there, I've asked myself, how can I improve that situation? So I'll always look at an item like rent, for example, like transportation costs. And I'll say to myself, okay, what is the absolute most that I could expect to pay for this? Because remember, in a new country, costs don't necessarily work the same way as they do back in your home country. Your behavior in your home country, whilst it might be a good predictor, if you're moving to a country where the climate is quite different, whether it's hotter or colder, for example, that's going to change your behavior when it comes to heating or air conditioning use. And whilst you may be familiar with what is a good deal or a good price back at home, it's going to take you time to work out what a good price is in your new country. In addition, unless you've got an already established, global business, or you've got, passive income already, if you're going to a new country for work, there might be an earnings gap between, leaving your last job and starting a new job. So there might be a period of time where you technically have no income from that. So again, you need to plan accordingly for that. Or obviously, if you're setting up something like a new business or a freelancing endeavor that you want to start, then again, it's going to take time to ramp up the revenue. The key thing to keep in mind here is that things do go wrong. Hopefully not everything will go wrong, but you're almost guaranteed that something will result in you incurring additional financial costs. And that thing that goes wrong could very well result in additional financial costs for you. So having the worst case scenario laid out and being prepared for it, again, is something that will give you financial peace of mind and it will ease some of the stress. The approach I take when coming to this is plan for the worst and then optimize from there. The third thing we're going to talk about here is your money management system and setup, particularly when it comes to navigating a foreign currency. So in many cases, you'll be relocated to a country where the currency may be different from your home country. Because remember, for things like daily spending, for a rental deposit, a house deposit, or setting up banking locally, moving money across borders, you're going to need some way to do that cost effectively. And despite us living in what is today a very international and global world, many traditional banks are still a bit behind the curve of catching up in terms of offers when it comes to, cross-border transactions, foreign currency transactions and management, and expat and non-resident financial management. And as a result, a lot of people often end up paying foreign exchange fees. They might pay commissions on converting or transferring money that inflate the costs further beyond what they necessarily need to be. And whilst it's pretty common knowledge and best practice that operating in local currency is the most cost-effective way and the best way to do things, customers still sometimes face foreign exchange fees, commissions from banks for being able to, withdraw foreign currency, pay in a foreign currency, send transfers in a foreign currency, which is a silent drain on your finances, and it further inflates that cost of relocating abroad. So what you ideally want to look for is a service that allows you to operate in multiple currencies with no hidden fees or FX charges, and that is easy and reliable to work with, which is where today's video sponsor, Wise, comes in. Wise lets you manage your money globally without the high costs of traditional banks. With Wise, you can hold over 40 different global currencies, and you can receive money with local account details for over 20 different currencies on the platform. I've used Wise a lot. I've talked about it a lot on this channel, and I've used it in multiple different countries around the world. I've made transactions in British pounds, euros, US dollars, Egyptian pounds, Emirati dirham, Georgian lari, and Turkish lira, just to name a few currencies that are available on the platform. And as we were talking about the typical cost of operating internationally with your money, particularly when it comes to moving large amounts of money for example, a house purchase, this is where Wise can be particularly useful. Wise uses the mid-market rate with no hidden fees, and users will receive automatic discounts on transfers of over £20,000. They have a dedicated team of experts to ensure a smooth and secure money transferring process, and you can also track the status of your transfer either on the app or on the website. I personally have used Wise to move larger sums of monies in previous years, so I can understand what it's like to feel a little bit nervous when you're moving those larger amounts of money, particularly across borders. But I was able to see and track the progress of those transactions. I believe in one instance it was actually instantaneous as well, so the money arrived immediately. And what you can also do is send a smaller amount of money across just to test it beforehand to make sure that everything works well. And that made me feel comfortable that the money was going to arrive with no issues and on time. And I'm sure that there are many of you watching this video, maybe who are looking to purchase a property overseas, or maybe a vehicle, or bring savings across for your everyday expenses, where using Wise can help you with that. And the Wise system, interface, and customer support service network is all set up to ensure that you have a positive experience and that your money arrives securely and safely from the country of origin to the destination that you're sending it to. And that's whether you're using Wise as an intermediary between two foreign banks, or if you're sending money from one foreign bank into a Wise account. All's good. So if you're looking for a service that can help you manage your money overseas, and particularly if you're looking to move large amounts of money across borders, then be sure to check out the link in the video description where you can sign up to Wise. With that link as well, you'll also get a first fee-free transfer when moving amounts up to £1,000 with Wise. Thank you again for sponsoring this video, Wise. And now let's get back to the final point. Related to this point about budgeting as well is having an emergency buffer. So having, a number of months of expenses, people typically say 3 to 6 months, some who are extra safe, maybe say 6 to 9 or even up to 12 months of expenses available in case you need them for an emergency. Because, even planning for that worst case scenario, as I say, things go wrong, and having a buffer on hand to, cushion some of the impact of an unexpected expense, or maybe even something costing more than you expected. Having that peace of mind that comes with an emergency fund is very, very helpful when you're navigating things like an international relocation. All right, now the last thing you shouldn't overlook is also something I talk about a lot on this channel as well, and that's taxes. I'm very fortunate to be connected with a good network of tax advisors, and having had the opportunity to speak to a large number of them as well, I've gained a lot of knowledge and insight as to how this works. But I appreciate that that's not necessarily the case with everybody else, and not everyone is familiar with how taxes work, both in their home country and in a new country when they're setting up. Now, you don't need to be an expert and know the ins and outs of the tax legislation of that country, but you do need to at least have a basic understanding of how do taxes work in that new country that you're setting up in. What are some of the key rules around tax residency when the tax year runs from? What are some of the, tax declaration or reporting requirements in that country, as well as whether your home country or the country you're coming from and that country have a double taxation treaty so that you are essentially not taxed 2 times on the same income. The first year will always be the most challenging because, as I say, number one, you're learning about a new tax system that's probably very different from that of the country you're coming from. And number two, it's a year where you may have dual obligations, essentially, so tax obligations both in the country you're coming from or your home country and the new country, because maybe both countries consider you tax resident, for example, which can happen for someone moving from the UK to Spain because of the misalignment of the tax years. And you can get into scenarios of, my income is sourced from this country, again, let's say the UK, how is that going to be taxed if I'm a tax resident in Spain? As well as other matters such as, should I sell assets before moving to a new country or after moving to a new country, based on what is the most preferential tax treatment? There's a whole lot of things that come into this, and I've had a number of conversations with, as I say, tax advisors on the channel, so you can be sure to check out those videos as well, as I'm sure you'll find them quite useful and informative. And I think the place to start is always to have a first read up and try and understand a little bit about where you're moving to, what the implications are. I get an understanding of how does the general tax system work, what kind of tax rates are you looking at based on your kind of income, looking at the implications of leaving your home country. So doing all that research first, and then if you realize you're at a point where you may need professional help, because that gives you, the peace of mind, or maybe you've got a particularly complex scenario, if you've got certain kinds of assets, or if you've got a particular business structure, or if you're really looking to, optimize your taxes to the most, that's when a tax advisor and speaking to someone can really help. But again, not something to overlook, because that can affect your numbers that you set out back in the budget if you get the tax part wrong. So really important to have at least a basic understanding, but of course, definitely better if you can speak to a professional and an expert. All right, guys, so I hope you found this video useful and enjoyable. Remember to check out the video link as well for Wise. So if you're looking to set up abroad, have a multi-currency setup, or move large amounts of money, they're definitely a great help. Leave a comment and let me know if any one of these things have caught you out when you've moved abroad, or if there's something else that I haven't mentioned that you thought is particularly worth noting when moving abroad. And if you like this video and you want to see related content when it comes to moving abroad, then be sure to check out these 2 videos here. Till next time, I'll see you in the next one, and let's get this money.